And Tedra Cobb joins us now. Welcome. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Even though many folks may just be starting to pay attention to the race, you've been running for well over a year, winning the Democratic primary back in June, as we just saw, in a landslide over a very crowded field of Democrats. There were 10 candidates in that race at one point.
Right. At one point 10, we were down to 5 at the end, and I won with almost 57% of the vote. So it was I handily won that.
So if folks are just starting to pay attention now, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your career, some of your issues, why you've decided to run for Congress.
Sure. I've been in the North Country for a little over 30 years. I am a transplant. I went to SUNY Potsdam and I stayed. I've set my roots down here. My background is in healthcare professionally. I did HIV and AIDS work for many years and then ran a community health agency. And I was a county legislator for 8 years, and I have served on many boards throughout that 30-year career. I was a volunteer firefighter. I've served on a domestic violence board, North Country Children's Clinic, and hospice, among others. So my background is varied, and I have deep roots in the community. I have had my own consulting business, some people might not know this, since 2003. And when I started that business, I became a chamber member in Plattsburgh because your chamber is so very active. And so I have many ties throughout the region, not just in St. Lawrence County.
So why run for Congress?
Well, I decided to run when Elise Stefanik followed through on her promise to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I have seen healthcare as a mom. I served on the hospice board after caring for my mother with cancer. And as a person who's run a community health agency, I know what people struggle with in terms of healthcare and also what healthcare providers are struggling with every day. The Hospital Association of New York State was vociferous in saying, do not repeal the Affordable Care Act. Rural hospitals will close, nursing homes, healthcare agencies, clinics, and yet Elise Stefanik voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a replacement. And I had been looking and thinking about running, but that really was a pivotal moment for me because of the impact on not just 64,000 people who would have lost their health care, but one of our number one economic drivers is healthcare. So all of the jobs, and then of course our healthcare delivery system. We are a professional shortage area, health professional shortage area in this region, and that would have harmed us immeasurably.
Healthcare is probably your top priority,
I would say it's my top priority.
Do you support Medicare for all? Is it time to go to a single payer system, and do you think that America is ready for that?
Here's what I want. I want every person to have portable and affordable health care. Anything less is unfair. Think about it this way, that people who are teachers, they have health care because we pay in for them, or people who work for a larger corporation might have health care. But those of us who I have a consulting business, my husband has a small business, struggle under the weight of health care. So if we want economic development in our region, healthcare is one way to get us there, because we could be investing those healthcare dollars back into our business, right? And we could be hiring other people, as well as having a healthy workforce. So for me, whether it's Medicare for all, or as some people have proposed, Medicare down to 50 and an expansion of the Affordable Care Act, or something that we don't know. What Congress's job is to solve problems. And they do that by asking experts, by holding hearings, by looking at budgets and what will work. That's what this Congress has failed to do. They repealed the Affordable Care Act and then pushed forward another, the AHCA, which would have ruined our healthcare system in so many ways. And healthcare costs have gone up because of their lack of doing anything. We, as Americans, deserve the opportunity to have health care, mental health care, not just primary care, but mental health care, emergency care, dental care, eye care. And this is what this Congress has failed to provide us. So again, for me, it's the driving principle that every person should have portable and affordable health care. And if Medicare for all is the best way to do that, I would support that.
After your primary win, the Republicans were waiting and ready and hit the airwaves with a television ad that includes video from the campaign event where you told volunteers that you support a ban on assault weapons but could never say that in public and still get elected here in the North Country. Has that hurt you in the eyes of voters, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think that I think people are, tired of twisted truths. I think people are tired of negative campaigning. And I think at the end of the day, they want to know who will help them with the struggles that they have, who will help them find a job, who will help them with health care, who will help them with educating their children, who will help them put food on the table. I mean, the reality is that I have served and I stand by that record. And if she chooses that path of negativity because she cannot stand by her record, that is her choice. But I will not go down that path.
And when I talk about voters, if it's hurt you with voters, do you think to many this is an example of a politician who says one thing but does something else to get elected, that may be how they perceive this?
No, let's talk about that. I have been consistent in my what I have said about the epidemic of gun violence in this country. I have been consistent. You know, as a person who has lived here for 30 years, I know how important the Second Amendment is. And I know how important we as responsible gun owners, myself included, my brother included, how important being a responsible gun owner is. I also know, as you would note in that video, the kids were talking about another school shooting. Another, not another school shooting. And so when we're thinking about this, and I really, sometimes I get a little passionate about this, but the reality is kids are afraid to go to school and parents are afraid to send them to school. But in this time, we know that Congress could have passed meaningful legislation. We know that gun owners and non-gun owners alike agree on banning bump stocks. That could pass. We know that gun owners and non-gun owners alike agree on universal background checks with no loopholes. Congress has done nothing. We know that people want an expansion of domestic violence laws so that people are protected in their homes. We know that we don't want criminals to have any gun, and that red flag laws would allow us to protect families and people in the community. This Congress has failed to act, and Elise Stefanik is part of that. These are the things that are important. Those are the things that I've talked about for over a year. I have not wavered from that, nor will I waver from that. I believe we can protect gun owners' rights while also protecting our community.
That video was secretly recorded by a teenager who it turns out was a tracker paid for by the Republicans, the National Republican Congressional Committee. Democrats use trackers too in this day and age to follow politicians just about everywhere. But was this different? The fact that the young man used a fake name and lied to get the video, do you think that crossed a line? Or in this day and age, is everything fair in politics?
Here's what I'm going to say. First and foremost, I have never used a tracker, nor will I. That is a choice. It's a campaign choice. I am the candidate and I lead my team. I lead my staff. I lead my community team. So they follow my lead. And voters will know who I am by how I run this race. I can talk about my history, but also how I run this race. Elise Stefanik is running a campaign that is, as some people have said, the Republican playbook or the Washington playbook. I am from the North Country. I do not believe we do things that way here. I will not do things that way here. So it's up to voters to decide whether or not they respect a candidate who will run a race that way. I have chosen not to do that. I think that voters are savvy enough, and I also think they're tired of that kind of behavior. I think they want someone who will run with integrity and serve with integrity.
As you head into the final few weeks now of the campaign, do you think you're in a good position to unseat Congresswoman Stefanik? Do you think she's vulnerable?
Well, if we follow negative campaigning, people who run negative campaigns are usually running from behind. So I'll take that negative campaigning as a good sign.
Elise Stefanik is now a two-term incumbent.
Yeah.
She won her last race in a landslide. And it's also a congressional district that voted for Donald Trump. And although it's a purple district, it's still more red than blue. And voter enrollment does favor the Republicans. With her last victory being an incumbent, is that a real hurdle for you to overcome?
So it's an interesting thing because you just said it was a purple district. It is a purple district. And we do, Donald Trump won, but so did Schumer. So I think the interesting thing about this particular district is that people vote for the person and not the party. Don't forget 90,000 independents, which more than covers the gap between Democrats and Republicans. And I think that's partly why it's so purple. Sure, there are pockets of blue and there are pockets of red, but we do swing. Remember, we had a Congressman Owens, who is a Democrat, and President Obama won this district decisively twice. Nate Silver just had this piece on elasticity, and that this particular district can swing dramatically from Democrat to Republican. We're not a swing district. It's like we're dramatically swing. And I think it is that people vote for the person and not the party.
And we mentioned Donald Trump. What about him? In so many of the House and Senate races across the district, this is clearly, the midterms are clearly going to be a referendum on Donald Trump and his presidency. Will that be the case for you?
I think that Donald Trump's administration is in chaos. I think it has become more and more as the days continue. But here's what I'm going to talk about in terms of leadership and why it's important to have an independent voice with this particular president. The president came to Fort Drum and should have honored John McCain. He did not. Our Congresswoman should have honored John McCain. She did not. That was a moment where she could have shown her independence and her leadership, and she chose not to. I think right now, at this time, we need a Congress that is independent. Elise Stefanik was on the Congressional Intelligence Committee and voted to close down the investigation. That was partisan. I believe she put partisanship before patriotism. The job of an elected official is to uphold your constitutional oath, your oath of office, and to do your duty in your job. Not only has this Congress not done that, but Elise Stefanik has not done that. Am I concerned about the president? Yes. Do I hope that the Mueller investigation will go forward unencumbered and be able to do what it has done so far? Yes. And Congress should safeguard that. And that is a concern that I have and will continue to voice.
Do you think you'll get any support from the National Democratic Party, or are they focusing their attention and dollars on other races? Will you be able to raise enough money to have the all-important TV and radio ads heading into the final weeks?
So let's think strategically for a moment here. You asked me how I got almost 57% of the vote. And I did that by being lean and by safeguarding money for TV and radio, which we did, or TV and print, which we did. I will do the same thing. I am running this race, again, for the people of Northern New York and with the people of Northern New York. So if the DCCC comes in at some point, that would be great. But I will continue to run the race the way we are running it.
There will be 3 televised debates, including one right here in this studio at Mountain Lake PBS in October. You have said you wish that there would be more debates or candidate forums leading up to the election. You'd like to see more out in the public that would allow people to come and participate, perhaps hundreds of people to ask the candidates questions.
Well, as you and I both know, Elise Stefanik has a reputation of not being accessible, of not having open town halls, and of not being in the district and meeting with people unencumbered by a moderator, or only meeting in small groups. After having run a primary, and I've lost count how many forums there were, the point there was to increase accessibility to voters. At the end of the day, this is about accessibility to voters. They will decide. They need to know who we are, why we're running, and why they should vote for us.
Your other opponent is Green Party candidate Lynn Kahn, and there's long been a sense that the Green Party candidates will draw votes away from the more liberal or progressive candidates, in most cases the Democrats. Is that a concern for you, that you're going to be trying to appeal to the same voters?
No, it isn't, and I think part of it is Green Party candidates often run on their environmental platform and record. Many people might not know this, but I lived off the grid for 11 years. My husband and I were very early adopters of solar. So in 1993, we built our house with solar. My husband is a solar installer. I drive a Chevy Volt. I live my environmental values every day. So I'm not concerned about my environmental record because I have a long history of my commitment to the environment. As people say, I walk the talk. I think Lynn Kahn brings a valuable voice because I think we think very similarly. And I think that she, as well as I, are holding Elise Stefanik accountable for her voting record, which harms the district.
If you're both progressive, though, do you split the vote? Does that make it less likely that either one of you can defeat Elise Stefanik?
I'm not worried about that.